What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the SFS channel and day number 2 of draft week, where I will be doing a mock draft for Fantasy Football 2020 every single day from now running until the last one will go up on Saturday morning. So if you guys are looking for advice on your drafts to wrap up draft season here for 2020, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for all the videos by turning the bell on. I'm not going to waste any time, so let's get straight into the draft. Hit the intro. All right, today I will be going with the 1-4 pick, which I actually don't think I've done a mock draft from this spot. And the reason I'm doing it from this position is I want to address the Alvin Kamara holdout situation and how I'm going to handle that spot in the draft now that he's not really on my board for the top of the first round. Today's draft is a standard draft, so touchdowns are going to be taken into heavy account here, along with the passing game will still be taken into consideration because of how valuable those reps and volume are to a fantasy player's production. But obviously, I'll be looking for a little bit more of goal line and workhorse running backs. And let's see what we have to work with here with my first pick. So right off the bat here, I'm looking at Saquon Barkley or Ezekiel Elliott. And I actually just put out a post on my Instagram today at Sizzle Fantasy Sports, where I talked about Saquon Barkley and how I'm a little bit concerned of him because of his schedule to start off the season. The Giants' schedule, the first 4 or 5 weeks, I believe, is just brutal, and it's why a lot of fantasy analysts are fading Daniel Jones. And I think that with that being taken into consideration, people should be fading Barkley off their boards a little bit as well because of the difficulty in matchup there. So along with this being a standard league, I'm going to go Zeke here at the 1-4 because Zeke Elliott, since he's came into the league, has been a standard monster. He racks up all those carries you want out of your workhorse RB1 and absolutely produces to a T in standard leagues. So Ezekiel Elliott is a pick I'm extremely happy with there, and I would love to get Ezekiel Elliott at the 1-4 in a standard league. So coming right back here, you see the absurd running back run that went here. The first 8 picks were all running backs, and in fact, 10 of the first 12 were running back, or 11 of the first 13 if you want to look at it that way. So huge running back run in the first and second round. Sleeper Fantasy shows you the perfect way to draft. It shows you how people should be drafting in your leagues. This running back run is exactly what should be happening because of the scarcity of workhorse running backs or even productive fantasy running backs this season. You have to be taking your running backs early and often, and Sleeper shows you exactly how it's done here. Austin Eckler would be a dream running back too, or Miles Sanders in the second round, but those guys are unfortunately gone. So looking at the board here, this is extremely similar to how I went in my PPR draft not too long ago. It might have actually been yesterday's PPR draft. That's Chris Carson, who is yet another ridiculous standard running back. I've been going over this over and over again every time I pick Chris Carson, but Chris Carson is the leader for running backs with over 20 touches in a game in 2019. So Chris Carson is clearly a workhorse for Seattle. Report just came out this morning through Sleeper that he has declared himself and his hip, which was his injury last season, 100%. So if Chris Carson hits the field running next year, look out because he's going to be an RB1, and it's not even up for debate because Chris Carson, when he's healthy, is an extremely productive back, and Seattle loves to run the football with Pete Carroll. So absolutely zero concerns with Carson there. And now in the third round, I'm picking another running back that I love this season, and that's Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon is a guy who is being faded a little bit because of his lack of production last season. I believe that his production was hindered mainly due to his holdout. And what I mean by that is when Melvin Gordon sat out last season, Austin Eckler absolutely broke out and emerged as a dominant running back in this league. He flashed versatility and showed fantasy players and the world that he can handle the RB1 workhorse load. And so when Melvin Gordon came back in week 5, he had lost some of his reps to Austin Eckler, and mainly the passing reps that he was so effective with in 2018. Melvin Gordon was fantastic in 2018 as the workhorse for the Los Angeles Chargers. He was extremely productive and got in the end zone a ton. He was putting up numbers just behind Todd Gurley that year, who was off the charts amazing as well. So, and Melvin Gordon can still do those things. I believe that his legs will be a little bit fresher from the lightened load last season, and Melvin Gordon will have that goal line work in Denver over Phillip Lindsay that you hope to see in a standard running back. Along with that, Gordon, I think, can actually receive some passing work on the Broncos because the Broncos, frankly, I don't think they believe that Phillip Lindsay is durable and can stand up to the hits that he's been taking. So here in the 4th round now, it's time to look elsewhere for positions. And I think this is an absolute perfect time to go after my wide receiver 1. And I'm going a bit of a floor play here, and that's with Robert Woods of the Los Angeles Rams. Woods had 140 targets last season, which is ridiculous. And when the Rams switched over to 12 personnel, Robert Woods was phenomenal. And he showed that he can be the number 1 wide receiver in Sean McVay's offense. And the added rushing value that he gets in that scheme is amazing for his fantasy production. Here in the 5th round now, I'm going to take the opposite of Robert Woods, and I'm going to go after a wide receiver who I think has a exceptional ceiling, and that's DJ Chark of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Chark showed last season that he has a great connection with quarterback Gardner Minshew, and Minshew magic with DJ Chark is a real deal. DJ Chark is a true wide receiver 1 in this league who has the body type to be a dominant wide receiver 1 and the speed and skill set to also put it all together and be a phenom in the NFL. Chark was highly productive last season prior to his leg injury, which slowed him down throughout the rest of the season, but he ended up making the Pro Bowl team regardless and was a highly productive player all year except for during that little stint of his injury where he was slowed down quite a bit. Going forward in 2020 with improved quarterback play from Gardner Minshew taking a step forward in his sophomore year and Chark just having another year in the NFL to learn and grow as a player, I see DJ Chark really emerging as a wide receiver 1 potential who is going to consistently put up those numbers for you in your lineup. And I think with the Jags being on the opposite end of some high-scoring games, they're going to be trailing a lot, and they're going to have to be throwing the football. And that is great for DJ Chark, who is the clear number 1 in this offense. Here in the 6th round, I'm going to go running back again, and I'm going to pick a player who I've been really high on lately, and that's J.K. Dobbins for the Baltimore Ravens. J.K. Dobbins is an electric runner, and at Ohio State, I watched him over and over again break tackles and explode onto the scene and just make these huge plays out of nothing. So I'm huge on J.K. Dobbins and his potential combined with his talent. I think that he's got the chance to take over that workhorse running back spot in the Ravens backfield by midseason this year, and maybe even earlier than that. I think that Mark Ingram is still a great running back, but at his age, getting dinged up is kind of part of the deal, and I think Mark Ingram might miss some time. He has missed time in the past, so I think that J.K. Dobbins, if he gets that opportunity, is going to take over the role and never to look back. Here in the 7th round, then, I'm going to take my first quarterback, and it's going to be Drew Brees. I think that Drew Brees might have to pass a little more than he's expecting to this season. Obviously, the Saints want to get back to running the football with Alvin Kamara, but just with Alvin Kamara's nature being a more receiving back, and along with the fact that he's actually holding out right now, I think that Drew Brees might have to throw more than he's anticipating. But then the offenses in the NFC South are really, really good. So the chances are that in a dome, the Saints aren't going to be able to produce highly on defense, and they're going to be in a lot of shootouts, so especially with their divisional games. So I think Drew Brees is a guy who I think his overall talent is starting to come down and decline with his age. But Drew Brees, from a fantasy perspective, I think still has what you need to get the job done, and so I'm really comfortable taking him in the 7th round. Here in the 8th round, I'm going to take another great value wide receiver, and that's Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones is a really productive player, and he's extremely efficient. Marvin Jones doesn't really need that many targets or receptions to get 100 yards and a touchdown because he's explosive and can make long plays happen down the field or score in the red zone. As a flex player or another option in the wide receiver group for my team, I really like taking Marvin Jones here. I think he pairs perfectly with the guys I've already drafted for this team. I'm really happy getting him here in the 8th round, and I think that he's a guy with tremendous upside and consistency who could really be a staple in your lineup if you have to keep him there. If you've been watching my YouTube videos, you know that I am a tight end whisperer, and I love my tight ends in that round 4 to 6 range, where I can snatch up a Mark Andrews or a Zach Ertz, possibly even a Darren Waller. But my guy, if I miss out on them, is Jared Cook. Jared Cook was the tight end 7 last season, and Sean Payton, the Saints offense, just loved throwing to the tight ends. So the fact that Jared Cook is going after some guys like Hunter Henry or Evan Ingram, who has a screw in his foot because of a Liz Frank injury, even Rob Gronkowski, who took a year off for retirement, is just baffling to me, and it really makes no sense. In PPR leagues, I'm even seeing Noah Fant go before him and others, and I think it's really quite astonishing, the players that are being picked over Jared Cook at the tight end position, because I think that he can be highly productive and be a top 5 fantasy tight end if everything plays out right for him. So Jared Cook in the 9th round is a no-brainer for me, and I'm not hesitating one bit to hit the draft button on him. Since I drafted Zeke in the 1st round with my 4th overall pick, I'm going to put some insurance on him and draft Tony Pollard at the back of the 10th round, because Tony Pollard is a very skilled running back, and if Ezekiel Elliott gets hurt, who is kind of my engine behind the team, you need someone to be able to step up, and Tony Pollard, when you consider that he is Zeke's backup, has a tremendous amount of value to my team because of that. And with his skill set and ability to catch passes out of the backfield and make big plays happen, makes Tony Pollard a no-brainer for this type of a league. Obviously, when you're considering handcuffs, they're extremely valuable if you own the player who starts in front of them. So I'm not big into picking handcuffs of another player's team just because you're kind of hoping and betting against another team's star player getting injured, but they can end up being a wasted roster spot as well, because if they don't get hurt, then you're just stashing them away for nothing. But in the case of Tony Pollard, I think it's extremely valuable since I do have Zeke on my roster. Now here in the 11th round, I'm going to fill out my wide receiver group by adding a big play guy who doesn't necessarily need those receptions to put up wide receiver 1 numbers for a given week, and that's Eagles wide receiver DeSean Jackson. So in standard leagues, I'm not necessarily looking for guys that are going to get a lot of targets late, because while that's extremely valuable and those do add up to good standard points, I think that guys who can break plays away and score in a flash are also extremely valuable, just because a touchdown can win or lose a week for you in a standard league. So DeSean Jackson's a guy who showed last season in week 1 when he was healthy. I believe he caught 4 or 5 balls and he scored twice on like 40-plus yard touchdown catches. DeSean Jackson is still one of the league's best deep route runners, and it's really hard for people to hang with him down the field. So DeSean Jackson, not necessarily going to be a starter for me, but a nice valuable piece on my bench to either trade for another asset down the line or plug in on a bye week is a great option to have. I've been preaching this in a couple of my mock draft videos. Justin Jackson is the one handcuff that I would consider taking if you don't own Austin Eckler or another member of the Chargers backfield, for the sole purpose that Austin Eckler is even described by himself as being an offensive weapon. And what he means by that is he lines up in the slot a lot. He lines up out wide, and he runs little slant routes and catches passes that way. And when they do that, they put Justin Jackson in the backfield. Justin Jackson is a highly effective runner, and he's very efficient, just like Austin Eckler is. The Chargers' offensive line has improved this season from last year. They added Trey Turner and signed Brian Bulaga from my Packers, so their line is trending upward. And I think Justin Jackson, just as a pure player, is a great talent. In fantasy football, I think sometimes the actual talent and effectiveness on a player on the field is a little undervalued, and sometimes situation is taken too high into account. They're both very important things, but sometimes a good player in a good situation, even if it's not necessarily a starting role or a workhorse role, can still be very good in fantasy. So I think Justin Jackson's a guy who holds value as a flex play in some deeper 2-flex leagues, even if he's not the starter, just because of how efficient he is and how effective he is as a runner. And then here in the 13th round, I'm actually going to take another receiver I'm extremely high on, as a sleeper in the late rounds, and that's Preston Williams of the Miami Dolphins. Williams just has a ridiculous frame. He's 6'5". He tore his ACL last season, but he was actually out-targeting and out-producing Devontae Parker before his injury, so I'm a huge Preston Williams guy, and I'm actually betting on him as my wide receiver 2 in one of my leagues that I went super RB heavy on in the start of the draft. It was a keeper league, and I was able to keep Miles Sanders in the first round, or the fourth round, So I ended up going running back in rounds 1, 2, 4, and 5. And I believe my last one was Dobbins that I snagged up in the 5th round. I was so happy when I left the draft because it's a half PPR league, so I felt like I could get wide receiver value late in the draft, and I was super happy how that turned out. And I got Preston Williams as my second wide receiver, so I really love him this season. And I think that him being a younger player, I think he has a great chance to develop along with Tua and form a connection and become a super productive wide receiver for the Dolphins for the foreseeable future. So that would be great. And then I'm a little intrigued here with my 14th round pick. The running back that I would actually want to own this season for the Jacksonville Jaguars is actually Chris Thompson and not Ryquell Armstead. Ryquell Armstead is like a lesser version of Leonard Fournette, who is kind of already an inefficient player and doesn't really host that much fantasy value, in my opinion, for your lineups to begin with. I think that the Jags having this lackluster defense actually benefits Chris Thompson more because as the receiving back, I see him being on the field more than people expect and catching a lot of checkdowns out of the backfield when Gardner Minshew is trying to make plays happen. So if I was going to take a Jags running back, I would actually go with Chris Thompson, and that's what I'm going to do here. I think this is my 6th or 7th running back, but I just can't pass up the opportunity to get more value at the running back position. And I could even flip Chris Thompson for another player later because the running back scarcity is just greater. And if you can find a valuable pick somewhere, it's going to be worth a lot more down the road. So looking at my roster right now, as it's currently constructed, I only have 1 quarterback, 1 tight end, but I still need a kicker and defense in these last 3 rounds here. So I'm actually going to take the opportunity to go defense here in the 15th round. And I'm going to pick the Denver Broncos, who I think are being slept on by some fantasy players. They added Jarrell Casey this offseason for virtually nothing. They still have Von Miller there. They're going to be a highly effective defense with Vic Fangio as their head coach, who was a great coordinator. And I think the Broncos defense will be highly productive this season, especially with all the weapons they have on offense. They're going to be able to control the football, control the pace of games, and the Broncos should be a highly efficient team this season. Obviously, their division is brutal, so they might not flash a high record, but I think that they're going to be a very good football team this season. Here in the 16th round, I love going Gardner Minshew as my second quarterback. I think he has great upside in fantasy football this season, so going Gardner Minshew is a pick that I love here. I've been talking about the Jags a lot today. The upside there, the defense, the passing. That's my 3rd Jags player I've taken on this team, so I'm going to get right into my kicker here for my last pick. And I'm going to end up going, I think, with Dan Bailey, the Minnesota kicker. Kickers are very streaky. It's hard to predict why a kicker goes to a certain spot. Usually you end up just picking your favorite team's kicker, so kickers are kind of a crapshoot in that sense. So let's take a look at the roster here and kind of break down how you would go about managing a team that turns out like this. So we are very strong at running back for a standard league, and that is what you're looking to see when you're picking standard leagues. You need those running backs because they are invaluable. You cannot overstate how important the running back position is in fantasy this season due to the lack of workhorses that we have this year. Backfields are starting to get more and more crowded as the running back and the running back talent in the league continues to just go up and up and up and through the roof. So teams are getting more and more crowded and trying to use more and more players at the same time, so it's becoming increasingly hard to find the guy in a backfield. And so I love the group I've put together here. Wide receiver, again, those top 3 especially, Robert Woods, DJ Chark, and Marvin Jones are exceptional. I'm super happy with that group, and I would start any of those guys in a given week. And then even Preston Williams down here, I would start him too if I could. So I love that group. At tight end, this is probably the most important thing to consider on this team is I only have one tight end. So Jared Cook is going to be kind of the guy if this were your team, and you're going to have to, on his bye week, just pick up a guy and stream him, and that's okay. Jared Cook is going to be a very effective player for you down the stretch and throughout the whole season. So I would say maybe if you were looking at a guy to drop to pick up that extra tight end, Chris Thompson would be a guy I'd be comfortable getting off my team. Or even if like one of these handcuff running backs went down with an injury, you could easily drop one of them for the top tight end on your waiver wire. So that'll conclude today's draft. Draft week day 2 is now in the books. That'll do it for day 2 of draft week. I will see you tomorrow for day 3, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow. So peace out.